Hey everybody, Dr. Dan here. Welcome to week 9, and we're on chapter 7 this week, and we're fresh off a spring break. So now the name of the week and the name of the chapter are two apart, if that helps. So anyway, chapter 7 is about Western and Eastern Europe after the fall of Rome. So the map you're looking at right now, which looks like a mess, is supposed to be Europe in the years between 800 and 1000. And this chapter that we're reading covers approximately between the years 500 and 1000. So it really starts early with the fall of Rome. But if you look at this map right now, it's kind of interesting, and I'll switch back and forth. But at around 800 or 900, the year 900, you can see already we see Spain starting to form, and the Frankish Empire is going to turn into France, and then we're going to read about Louis the German, so Bavaria and Germany, modern-day Germany is starting to come together, although, you know, in the year 900, there was no Germany and there was no France yet, and not anything like the modern countries, but it's starting to come together. And as you look at the map, you see the poles and you see Russia, and we're going to learn about Russia a little bit as far as this mixture of Slavic people with Vikings, with Swedish Vikings called the Rus, and that's sort of the base of Russia. So particularly timely right now as the Russian invasion of Ukraine is going on. So we'll look at that area, and let me just kind of move here since we are, we are in the middle of the Ukrainian invasion, Putin's Ukrainian invasion. If you see the Black Sea down here, and I don't even know if you can see my cursor on the screen, but there's the Black Sea and the Dnieper River right here. So this is modern day Ukraine, and you can see Kyiv right here, the capital, which this evening, as I'm making this recording, is under attack by the Russians. And it's timely also because one of the points this chapter makes at the end is that, between the years 500 and 1000 in Europe, after the breakup of the Roman Empire, all of these little states are forming and battling each other. So the book makes a point during this time period. If you look at a place like China, there's still all of these provinces, if you will, but they're all still kind of under an empire. Whereas in Europe, that doesn't happen. We get this split into many states, and that's actually a question on the quiz, which I'll read to you. And it's still going on today, I would argue, with the Ukrainian invasion by Russia. So we'll get back to that, but I just wanted to bring that up. So again, time and place for this chapter. The place is right here. You see on your screen, this is Europe, and it's Western and Eastern Europe. And it's broadly outlining the old Roman Empire. Well, it's still the Roman Empire during this period of time, especially in the Byzantine area, the Eastern Roman Empire, but the Western Roman Empire is gone, although Rome is still there. So there's a lot. And anyway, so there's the map, and let me kind of get over to the reading notes. So as you go through chapter 7, there's an intro, and this period's really called the Middle Ages or the High Middle Ages. And when you look at these years, right after Rome fell, so you get into 500 to maybe 800 in there. There's really this decline in society. So the state, the government, is non-existent after the fall of Rome. So there's a lot of little estates and a lot of warriors and a lot of basically rich guys who have their own little kingdoms going. So it's sort of a feudalistic situation that's going on. And I think as you read through the chapter, you'll pick that up. But one of the things you'll read about is that really Western Rome and Rome itself, these beautiful cities with these fountains and public baths and aqueducts, they're all falling apart. They're all in disrepair. Some of the book talks about some of the public baths and the buildings being reduced to rubble because Rome, if you remember, was sacked by the Visigoths. And it really never came back into its grandeur during the Roman Empire for a number of reasons. But one of the reasons was it just didn't have the wealth, and the Visigoths just didn't have the didn't have the momentum to do that, for lack of a better way to say it. So in the chapter, you'll read about what happened to Western Rome, and sort of the theme you want to get out of this is that even though Rome itself fell, and a lot of these small kingdoms cropped up and changed during the time of Charlemagne and during the time actually of Justinian, the church, the Catholic Church, remains very strong throughout this period of time. So regardless of the empire, most all of these guys, and I will say guys as far as men in power goes, almost all of these guys were like really strict Catholics. But at the same time, the thing that happens in this chapter is that Islam, begins also and starts to be influential. And that, as we get into chapter 8, we'll read a lot more about that. But again, that's there also. So point being that old Rome, which is modern Europe, the old Roman Empire, which is part of it is modern Europe, has fallen apart. And where France is today is where Charlemagne and that empire grows, and he's a warrior. And really, this Frankish Empire and the Empire of Charlemagne grows, and it's really sort of the dominant story through this chapter. But Charlemagne, I guess, he was a warrior, and he was recognized by the Pope for being a leader, and I think he thought that he was sort of the inherited leader of the Western Roman Empire, but of course that wasn't true because the old Roman Empire didn't exist. But on the other side, the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire over there in what is Istanbul today in Turkey, is still going strong under Justinian, so you'll want to read about that. There's something on the quiz about the Justinian Code, which is the law under Justinian, and how it was really anti-Semitic in nature. It was codified that Jews wouldn't have civil rights. So read about that. I bring that up because throughout this class I try to bring up these examples of where discrimination and gender start, and as far as anti-Semitism goes, that is dislike of Jews. That goes all the way back to this time period under Justinian, and you'll read about that in the book. So as far as what's going on throughout Europe, we talked about Charlemagne in this Frankish Empire. After Charlemagne dies, his grandkids, actually, one of them is Charles the Bald, I think. Yeah, for real. And the other one is Louis the German. So what happens is that after Charlemagne dies, his grandkids, there's actually three of them. Charles the Bald gets what is going to become France. Louis the German gets what is going to become Germany at some point. It's actually like Saxony and Bavaria back then. And then there's another son named Lothar, and he got in northern Italy, and I think he got a little land west of Germany. So Charlemagne dies. He's the big famous king during this era in Europe. He dies. His kids get the rest of Europe to split up. And again, that's the story of Europe throughout, all the way up to, like 1400, 1500. It's basically these rich guys, these warriors that have land, that are running the show with all these little kingdoms. And if you look at a European map between like the year 800 and the year 1500, you'll see all these little places come and go on the map. And anytime you see that on maps, if you see a lot of changes over a short period of time, that means there were a lot of wars generally. So that's the armchair historian in me. So anyway, the point is Charlemagne dies, his grandkids get all of this land in Europe, and then the Vikings come. So there's Viking invasions, and all the way up, into the Mediterranean, up all the way up, through Turkey into the Black Sea. And again, since we're talking about Ukraine and Russia, it's very timely because the Slavic people who lived in that whole area where Ukraine, Russia, Hungary is now, which is where I come from. The Slavic people are invaded by Vikings, in this case mainly Swedish Vikings, in the time period of around the 900s, 800s. And so this tribe called the Rus, really, or these groups called the Rus, R-U-S, the base word of Russia, come into play, and they're really sort of a mixture of Slavic and Norse people. So many Hungarians, myself, if you do a 23andMe test to see where my roots are, I definitely have Norse and Slavic roots. So I come from that. My family comes from that area. But again, check it out, because maybe some of you, I don't know, everyone so represents the globe at the university, but maybe some of you will find particular as you look at the map of Europe, if your family comes from Europe at all, maybe you'll find some things that are intriguing to you. So check that out, and then the chapter goes on and talks about the age of invasions, and again, because the Vikings are coming in, and ever since the Goths, or the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths took down Rome, there's all these invasions going on. So check that out. You'll read that the old Byzantine Empire really kind of thrived, and then you'll read the conclusion, which is Global Perspectives, and it'll talk about how fragmented Europe was after really Charlemagne. And that's going to cause a lot of trouble moving forward, I would argue, all the way through, World War I, World War II, and now. So that having been said, let me go through the quiz really quick for you. And so what you want to know is, sort of the same old themes repeated, but I mean, again, that's what the class is about in some sense. So as far as gender is concerned, there's a question about gender on the test in early Rome, and also in the Frankish kingdom. So really, it's gender and the church. And so if there's ever a gender question, it's always patriarchal. All right, guys are always running the show back then. So one of the questions on the quiz is about that. And then the other thing is talking about ruralization. So when you read the chapter, you'll read that after the fall of Rome, Europe goes rural, and there's sort of this breakdown in institutions as far as government's concerned. So one of the things that happens back then is the church, which is very influential, kind of takes over running everything, including education. So many of you maybe went to Catholic school, but certainly all of us know of schools that are affiliated with our religions or our faiths. And so faith-based schools, that idea, they really start in this period of time. So there's a question on the quiz about who's responsible for education in the Middle Ages, for the most part in Europe, and the answer is the church. So you want to know that. And again, I think it's interesting because it reflects sort of the modern structure of education. Anti-Semitism, we already talked about that. There's a question about the Justinian Code and how it sort of took away the civil rights of Jews. And so it's really sort of this first evidence of anti-Semitism that we see. There's another question about Charlemagne, and the answer is yes. Okay, so that's all I'll tell you. No, the question is about Charlemagne and the fact that the Pope granted goodness upon him, and it just indicates that there's a real close tie-in between the Catholic Church, or the Church, and the state during Charlemagne's time. So a pretty easy question. And then lastly is this question that really is answered in the conclusion of this chapter, and the question asks, what's sort of the difference between China, for example, and Europe during this period of time? And the answer is that Europe ends this period of the Middle Ages between 500 and 1000 really fragmented, and it's going to get more so into a lot of little kingdoms. And so after the fall of Rome, any consistency of governance or rules went out the window in Europe, as opposed to China, where it was always under the influence of a central empire. And I think that's relevant and important, especially today when we're watching what's happening in Europe and the threat of new wars. You can argue that this fragmentation of Europe is still going on, and there's a lot of reasons for that we'll get to. So that's it. That's the quiz. I hope this lecture wasn't too boring or confusing. I hope you're having a good week, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Have a great day. Bye-bye.